This afternoon, I'm going to have Erin Purdy, who is the Associate Director of Programs and Interventions at the Health Initiative for Men, introduce our afternoon plenary speaker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Purdy. Thank you for that introduction of the person introducing, Jody. I'm always happy to be here at the summit, and I'm here to invite my wonderful, handsome, talented, sexy friend, Andrew. I first met Andrew in 2015, or 16. 2016, when an organization in Vancouver called Real Wheels was bringing Andrew to the city to do a conversation with people with disabilities around sex, access to their bodies, and celebrating that within a theatrical context. And the organizer contacted him saying, hey, Health Initiative for Men, which is the organization I work for, saying, hey, do you folks want to partner? It seems like Andrew might be talking about things that your constituents, your participants might want to talk about. And Andrew came, and we spent the couple days that he was here visiting. He presented a talk for Health Initiative for Men called Deliciously Disabled, which is also the name of his former business and partnership. Andrew brings a voice to sex and disability that isn't heard. Andrew brings context to a conversation that has been erased for countless years. And he is currently, and he gained a great degree of notoriety in Toronto for organizing what was then known as a disability orgy, but what it actually was a disability body positive sex and play party, which received kind of massive media attention. He's been featured in numbers of media, MTV, and he's a very popular social media advocate, including coining the hashtag disabled people are hot, which kind of made its way all across the country. He's a huge nerd. He's amazing, and he has something to say. And without further ado, Andrew Gurza.
Wow. Hello, everybody. That ramp's a little bit scary. Wow. I'm just gonna back up so that I don't hurt myself. Yep. All right, we're good. Can I have somebody? Erin, can you be my flipper? Thank you. Wow. Maybe. Hello. My name is Andrew Gurza, and thank you all for coming today. This is a really packed room. Wow. So I decided not to wear my harness today. I'm sorry. I know you were all looking forward to it. But it's chilly in Vancouver. So this is Queering Healthcare, Access and Accessibility with your number one queer cripple, me, Andrew Gurza. And I want to give a really big shout out to CBRC for bringing me in, Erin Purdy for helping to organize that, Health Initiative for Men, Michael Quagg, all the people that made this possible today, because traveling as a disabled person is really hard. The flight was really bad. And it's really tough to get people in to have these conversations. So when CBRC reached out to me earlier in the year and said, we want you to do this, how do we make this possible? I was really pleased when they didn't bat an eye and when I gave them my access needs and I explained what accessibility was for me. So I want to make sure to give them a big shout out. I also want to thank my mom, who's in the front row, who came as my attendant care worker, who's helping me do all my personal care needs at the summit, because disabled people have to pee too, so that's what she's here for. So, all right, we can get started now. Erin, can you flip ahead, please? Oh, that's awesome, thank you. So, I just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. This presentation today will reference language around disability that was at one time deemed offensive and inappropriate. So, just so we're all aware, the language I'll be using today is queer and cripple together as a string of words. That language, both of those words have been deemed at one point. Some people don't like it. I use it as terminology for myself to empower myself as a disabled person. And I use it so that people who don't understand disability will sit up and take notice of what I'm saying. Go past the language and look at the deeper message of what I'm trying to say, which is, hi, I'm disabled, I'm here too. So when I use that language, I'll only be referring to myself. I would not recommend that you go out in the street and start yelling, hey, cripple, what's up? Don't do that. I would not recommend that. But I use it for myself as a point of pride. So that's some of the language I'll be using today. I also want to make known, even though Aaron let you know about all the cool things I've done and all the awesome awards that I have won, which I'll get to, I'm not an expert in the field. I'm just somebody here sharing my story and my experiences to get us to talk more about disability more readily in these contexts around queerness. And I'm only here to tell my story. I am not every single disabled person. I cannot speak to that. I only speak to my experience as a queer, disabled, wheelchair-using person. So I'm aware of my privilege as a cis, white, disabled guy. I'm aware of that, and I'm not trying to speak over or for anybody else because that's not my job. So as I speak today, I speak about my experiences only to give context to this stuff. We're also going to talk a little bit in this talk today about loneliness, depression, and disability because we, as disabled people, and myself obviously included, we're very much isolated from a lot of queerness. We can't go to bars, we can't go to sex clubs, we can't go to all these places, and the places we can go, like the apps, are full of ableism. So we're gonna touch on all these things today as we go ahead. Okay, so who am I? This is a picture of me at a Planned Parenthood coffee dinner in Toronto a couple months ago where I won the Choice Award for being a trailblazer in sexual health and disability for my work on my podcast. I'm also the co-founder of Deliciously Disabled, which Aaron said was and is my company. We're rebranding it. Things are happening with that. Where we're trying to create the first line of hands-free sex toys for disabled people. So that's all happening. Thank you. You should also pull out your phones right now and download my podcast, Disability After Dark. It's the only podcast right now talking about sexuality and disability every single week. I'm really proud of that because there's not enough of that in the digital media space. And I didn't think it would go more than 5 or 10 episodes, and we're now up to almost over 200. So that's really, really cool, and I'm excited about that. As Aaron also mentioned, I'm a huge dork. I like 80s TV shows. Anything with John Stamos, I'll watch. I like really bad pop music and bad puns. I don't have a bad pun right now, but I like them. And just in case you were all worried, I am the sexiest, most deliciously disabled person you'll ever meet in your whole life. So don't worry, because I've already won that. So okay, we can move ahead. So today, that's really small font. I should have made it bigger. This is what happens when you get older. You start. Thank you. So we're going to talk today about disability, and we're going to talk about what disability means to us as a culture, and then to me as a disabled person. I'm going to share some of my experiences around that. We're going to talk a lot about ableism, and I'm going to give you definitions as to what that is. We're going to define it. We're going to talk about how it plays a role in how disabled people are treated and how they're understood in the world. Because discrimination against disabled people happens every day, and it's not in a big, overt way. It's often very, very small things that happen that make us feel less than or not worthy, especially in queer spaces. Happens all the time. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go ahead. We will, of course, talk about my favorite thing, sex and disability, and how that feels as a disabled person. So often we get stuck in how do you have sex as a disabled person? That's the question that's the most asked question that I got that I get when I speak about what I do. And I always go back to, why aren't you asking me how it feels? Why aren't you asking me about the emotional experience of trying to access sex? So we'll talk about that as well. I'm going to share some of my stories with you as a queer disabled person, and you will, at the end of this presentation, have a chance to ask me questions. And I really want to stress that, because so often when I ask questions and I do stuff like this, people are really too shy and too scared to ask me things because they don't want to offend me, but they have questions. So what will happen is I'll say, oh, you have questions, and then people won't respond. And then 2 weeks later, I'll get 20 emails. But, well, I was at your talk, and here's a question that I really wanted to ask, but I was too scared. So what I'm saying is, even if you're scared, ask me, because I probably heard it before, and I probably know it comes from a place of you just want to know better, and you want the information. So it's my job as a consultant to give you that information and to give you the tools to change the conversations around sex and disability, and that's my job. So help me do my job by asking those questions later, please, and thanks. So I do want to ask one question before we get to the barrage of questions for the group. What do we think we know? What do we think when we hear the word disabled? And I'll take that hand over there. Hi. Yeah, that's definitely something we're used to hearing. Anybody else? Hi. Yep, totally. And there was one over. Hi. You said unable? Yep, that's right. So all of those are very, very true statements, and that is what we tend to think about when we think about disability. And I have compiled some pictures to talk about what we think about when we think about disability. We often think about this, and this is the universal sign for the disabled that's all over the world. Whenever you look for anything to do with access or disability, this is what you see. This is good for wheelchair users, but can be problematic for people who have invisible disabilities, who are deaf, who have emotional disabilities that mean they don't need to use a wheelchair. So I look at this sign and I see part of access for myself. I don't see access entirely. But and the trouble with this picture and this logo is that it only speaks to one part of the community, and it's leaving out a whole bunch more. So we need to do better than to say that this is the universal access sign. Also, when we think about disability, we tend to always conflate it with ability. So oftentimes you'll see things that say like, oh, this event is for people of all abilities. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? So, and you never see somebody say, this is for disabled people. This is for somebody with a disability. Disabled people are never put in the front. We're always made to be an afterthought, or we're lumped in with ability, which I understand where that comes from, but it also erases part of our culture. And as we've talked about earlier today in some of the plenaries, there's such a rich culture of people out there, and one of the cultures we tend to erase without thinking about it is the disabled and disability as a culture. So when I say I'm a disabled person, people will always say, no, Andrew, you're a person first. And I said, well, yeah, but I'm a disabled person first. So I really try to hone in on the fact that disability is not a bad thing. It's not something to be afraid of, and it's not something to be erased, because when we erase it, we lose so much of the culture, and I am trying in my own way to bring it back. So the next time you see somebody say like, oh, you're not disabled, you have all the abilities, you should stop them and say, well, they can be disabled and still be able to do things. That's fine too. So, but this is what we see a lot in our culture, this erasure of disability. Then I picked this picture because most people I know in wheelchairs don't use hospital chairs from the 1980s to get around anymore. Most of the people, maybe some do, but most of my friends in wheelchairs don't use chairs like that. So we need to change the imagery of wheelchair users especially, because this is not what we do. We're often in power chairs or different types of manual chairs or scooters, or sometimes we can walk but we need a chair for long distances. There's such a variance in how disability can look. We really need to change the viewpoint. And so pictures like this show, and I just went on Google and typed this in to put it in the top, which shows that this is the kind of prevalent stuff we're seeing, and we need to change that. So let's talk about what disability means to me. And on the right is a logo that I created of my company, Deliciously Disabled, and why I'm speaking to that is because it's a different logo than what we're used to seeing. It's somebody who is in a wheelchair. It's an abstract wheelchair user with, because I'm queer, of course, the rainbow colors are there. And it also means energy. It means possibility. And so I like this because it makes us look at disability differently, through a different lens. And I just thought it was important to share that. I see disability as something that we need to celebrate and acknowledge in our own culture and community. So we have a bunch of pride parades all over. Why don't we have disability pride parades that are not pride parades where disabled people are constantly angry and fighting for their rights and having to scream over injustices? Why can't we have pride parades that celebrate the fact that we're disabled? We need more stuff like that. Disability is something that can happen to anyone in this room at any time, if it hasn't happened already from birth. It can encompass the experience of using a mobility device like me, having a chronic illness like fibromyalgia or EDS, having an invisible disability like epilepsy, which you may not be able to see, having a limb difference, and so much more. Disability is so nuanced and so much bigger than, oh, you're in a wheelchair, so you must be disabled. It's so much more than that, and we need to recognize that. We also need to recognize that all of these things, these ideas around disability are very scary. They're very unknown. People are very afraid of them, and they're daunted by all this stuff, which is fair because we don't have enough lived experience representation out there for people to normalize this idea in a way that feels safe and comfortable for them. So rather than asking, we just shy away. And for me, that's the problem. We need to start having these conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they are, because we just need to. So let's start talking more about the... Oh, yeah, no, that one. Hang on, let me just... No, we're good. We can move ahead. So let's talk about ableism. So my question is, and I'll take one hand, what is ableism? Hi? What? That's not a definition that I've heard before. Not exactly. I wouldn't say that's exactly what it is, but thank you for your comment. Okay, we can move ahead. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's. Hi, go ahead. Yep, that's all encompassed in what ableism looks like. And so now I'm going to give you a bit of a broader definition. So ableism, on its face, is the discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. So if you do something that gives privilege to somebody who is not disabled over a disabled person deliberately, or even not deliberately, that's ableism. It is the practices and attitudes designed to explicitly and implicitly devalue the experiences of disabled people. So if you say something about somebody's mobility device in a funny joke, that's ableism. If you say something about somebody's ability to help themselves, that's ableism. If you say something about somebody's ability to, if they have an intellectual disability, that's ableism. That happens all the time. So we have to be really cognizant of how we speak about people, because you may not know that somebody has a disability. So we have to be very aware of the way we speak about it, but also our values. And so ableism has shaped the way we see disabled people in society. So we have to be aware that it's out there all the time, and we have to be really cognizant of it. It's also important to note that everyone in this room, myself included, can and has been ableist in their lives at some point, whether they're disabled or not. They can, have been, or will be ableist. And you know what? That's okay. Doesn't mean you're a horrible person. Doesn't mean that you don't care about disabled people. It means that we have a lot of learning to do and growing to do together. So if somebody calls you out for your ableism, say thank you and say, okay, how do I fix this? Because obviously you've hurt somebody even if you didn't mean to, and we should find ways to make it better. But it's a learning process. It won't happen overnight, and that's okay. There are a number of different types of ableism. Sexual ableism. So on the apps, when someone says, hey, so I see you're in a wheelchair, does your genitalia work? That's a form of sexual ableism. Institutional ableism is when, say for instance, a university doesn't give you more time for tests and you have a learning disability and you need help. That's institutional ableism. Medical ableism is when you go to the doctor's office to get a STI test and they don't know what to do with you because you're a wheelchair user. So all that stuff falls into ableism, different types, but it's still, on its face, discrimination against disabled people. And if you are a disabled or chronically ill person, you've probably experienced this to some degree, and so you're probably sitting there being like, yep, that's happened to me, yep, that's occurred. Because this stuff happens all the time, and we often don't talk about it enough. We need to start talking more about how ableism plays a role in how disability feels, because ableism means that sometimes I don't want to go out. It means that I don't want to engage with my community. It means that I don't want to do sex and disability work because I don't feel like I'm part of a community. So it really plays a role in how I feel about myself as a disabled person within the context of being queer, within the context of being disabled, and we need to talk about it more and give it name. Just like we speak a lot about racism and a lot about transphobia, we also need to remember that disability is connected there too. There are disabled trans people, there are disabled indigenous people. All of these things are connected, and we need to remember that. All right, now let's talk about my favorite thing, sex and disabilities. So I found this on the internet, this picture of a condom wrapper with a wheelchair, and I was like, well, that's cool. Can somebody make that, please? So I put it up there. Okay, we can move ahead. So I want to talk about some common myths about sex and disability that are out there. One of the common myths that we have are that disabled people don't want or can't have sex. And I laugh at this because that's just untrue. I want sex all the time. And I can have lots of it if I choose to. So that's wrong. Some of the other mythology is that if I have sex with you, I will be your caregiver for life. And to that I say, no, I have caregivers for that. Maybe I just wanted to have sex with you. But also to that I say, like, if I need help during sex, you will have to do some care for me. You'll have to help me get undressed. You'll have to help me get positioned. You'll have to position yourself over me so I can provide you pleasure. All that stuff requires care. So yes, in some ways, you will be a caregiver to a disabled person. And if that scares you, then we can't have sex. Sorry. One of the other mythologies around sex and disability that's pretty common is, if I have sex with you, I'll hurt you. And to that I say, well, maybe I like pain. You don't know. But that's also true in the fact that some people have different levels of disability where pain is a real thing. And so this is where consent comes into play and why we need to start talking to our partners about what do you like, what's possible for you, how do you do this. It's really, really simple. It's asking questions and not assuming. And so if your partner says, this hurts me, don't do it. Unless they say, do it more. Another common myth is that you're paralyzed, so you can't do it. Well, that's just wrong. There are some people that I know in the work that I do who are paralyzed and who maybe can't use their genitalia as a non-disabled person would, but they can still achieve pleasure and enjoy themselves. So this idea that just because your genitalia may not work in the quote-unquote normal ways doesn't mean you can't enjoy yourself. Constantly worrying if my genitals work. Seriously, if I'm out in the world, don't ask me if my dick works. Please. Please. Unless we're getting down, don't ask me. And even if we are getting down, don't ask me, because maybe I'm going to enjoy myself. Don't ask me. Thanks. Another myth is, so you're in a wheelchair, so you must be a bottom, which, again, untrue. I'm a really good top. Secondly, I'm unable to bottom because of my own disability. So the idea, I often feel like I'm missing out on that part of queer male identity because I can't do that. So having discussions around my abilities in that way feels really weird because I don't know what that feels like. And I would need a lot of help and care that people that I sleep with aren't ready to provide. So it's a whole discussion of like, hey, would you help me with this really intimate thing? But also I need your help with some care stuff on top of that. So there's a whole discussion around that mythology. But disabled people can top and bottom as they or neither or both as they choose to. Okay, we can move ahead. What does sex and disability really feel like? Well, this was me taking a dorky picture in my room, and I needed a picture for this slide, so here's what I did. So sex and disability can be amazing because it makes you look at the body differently. I'm forced to look at my body in a different way because I can't do things that other queer men do without disabilities. I just can't. So you are forced to look at your body in a different way, which can be amazing, but also annoying at the same time. Sexuality and disability can be really hard because of sexual ableism and prejudice. Imagine if every time you went to sleep with somebody, they asked you if your genitalia worked, or they asked you, how I can't help you because you're in a wheelchair, or all those things, in the moments when you're supposed to be sexually enjoying yourself. Sex and disability can be lonely because of the lack of understanding or acceptance of disability in social sexual spaces. Social isolation and loneliness can be very real. I don't want to go to the bar to spend 3 hours getting to the bar only to get there to not be talked to all night, or to not be able to get in, or to realize that I can't get on the dance floor, or that somebody doesn't want me there on the dance floor because my chair's in the way. All these things have happened to me. So you end up staying home because home is where you feel the safest and where you can be as disabled as you need to be without prejudice. So a lot of queer disabled men may have a really, in my experience, may have a really high sex drive and desire to be intimate, but no access, and they would choose to stay home because it's easier. Sex and disability could be the best sex you're not having. So if anybody wants to find me after the talk, I'll be around. I get really, really frustrated because I'm constantly told by my queer, gay, and non-binary and non-disabled dates or hookups that I am too much. They tell me all the time that I'm too needy, too intense, too involved. I should relax more. Why am I so? Why do you text me all the time? Why? It's because that's how I connect with my community, through digital spaces, because that's the most accessible to me. So people tell me all the time, well, just, I'm busy, I'm doing stuff. For me, that's how I connect. So when people tell me that I'm too much because of my disability, it feels like you're not understanding where I'm coming from. And if I'm honest, all that stuff really hurts. It really hurts to try to reach out to the community and be a part of the community and put a smile on and be just as sexually expressive as all the rest of them, and then be told that my version of sexual expression, because I'm disabled, is too much. So that can be really hard. It's 10 minutes? Okay. It's like being told that nobody wants to access me, and that sucks because I'm hot, so too bad for you. I was just told we have 10 minutes. I'm going to race through this. In the queer community, we see mostly, especially in the queer male community, we see pictures like this. This is a great picture. I like this picture. But this picture does not denote the fact that this person is disabled. It would be great if he was like, hey, I have an invisible disability. Let's still have sex. But that's not there. So we only see this picture, and we can move ahead. Aaron? Thanks. But when do we see pictures like this? This was me in a harness trying to look hot, but I actually was trying to hold back a sneeze right there. So when do we see this? This is me. I did a photo shoot for Gay Times UK. That went all over in their print magazine. Sexual ableism also looks like this. So this is somebody on Grindr. I said, hey there, and they said, hi, I think the whole wheelchair thing is a bit much to handle for me on an anonymous sex date. I'm sorry, I hope you have a lovely weekend anyway. Note that I just said hi. My only interaction with this person was, hello, how are you? And that's what I got back. And then this other one, we had started a conversation, and then they disappeared for a day, and they came back and said, morning, sorry, don't know why I'm attracted to you, but do you want a quickie? Oh, wow. I have never been more excited to be with a person. You don't know why you're attracted to me. Wow, wow. So those are some of the tamer things I've gotten. People have also told me that I should go to the gym to work off my disability, that I should, that like they can come over and cook for me and take care of me because my life's so hard. And it's like, no, I just want to have sex with you and then you can leave. Thanks, bye. So really quickly, how does sex and disability look differently when you're disabled? As a queer man, I have a specific image of what gay sex is meant to look like and what it's meant to be like. And those images don't involve people like me. The images that I am fed, just like the images that all of you are fed, are of white, able-bodied men sleeping with each other. So we need to change that. So my job as a consultant is to do that with photos like what I've shown you there. As a wheelchair-using queer man, all these images had to be thrown out when I started having sex. I started to realize my body didn't fit any of this stuff. So I felt a lot of shame when I started having sex because my body was nowhere to be seen. I realized quickly that I could not bottom, and that even when I topped, I couldn't, this is really weird with my mom in the front row, I couldn't thrust my body into a partner. See, it's weird. As a queer man, I still hold a ton of shame and pain around all of that because I feel like I'll be letting down my able-bodied partner and not meeting their expectations or desires for sex. That's happened before, where I've had to say, like, I can't do this. I can top you, but you have to do all the work. And they're like, oh, well, you can't thrust, then we can't mess around. And I'm like, well, that's okay. So it can be really, really hard to try and explain these fears and this ableism to a partner in the moment when you're trying to be sexy and cool and suave. You can't be like, hey, can we just stop? My ableism is happening right now. That's not sexy. So it's really hard to have those conversations. This is a picture of me holding up a sex toy. And I have 5 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to tell some stories about myself. This is a picture of me holding up a sex toy, trying to look shocked by it. So I want to talk about getting tested for STDs and being disabled, and I want to talk about what medical professionals need to know. I was tested. I've been having sex for 15 years. I didn't get tested for a long time because of ableism. I should have been, didn't get tested. So I got tested I started getting tested regularly for about 5 or 6 years ago, and I didn't know where to get tested. So a partner had emailed me and said, I think I have something, you should go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor. No, I looked around, and the doctor said, oh, I can't help you. My office is not accessible. So I decided to go to the ER, because I was like, well, the ER will know what to do. They deal with disabled people, I'll just go in there. So I go there. I spend an hour and a half to get there. I get on the bus, and I'm freaking out the whole time. Not because I might have something, but because how will I explain this to my attendant care workers who have to touch my body every day? How will I do all this? So I was freaking out. I get to the hospital. I go to the charge nurse, and I say, hi, I want an STI test. How do we do this? And she was like, oh, why do you need that? And I was like, because I'm sexually active, and what? So she brings me in, and I had to wait 3 more hours for the doctor. The doctor comes in and goes, so what kind of sex did you have? And I said, well, anal, and I was the top, and so what do we do? What needs to be done? What tests do we... I had no idea. I was very ignorant. And he said, well, you can just go back to your GP for that. And I said, no, I can't. They're not accessible. That's why I'm here. Please test me. It's like, well, I guess we could test you. Great. So they tested me. Everything came back not positive. I was pleased at the time, but I was upset because I was like, you still didn't make me feel good. I felt ashamed about the whole experience. So now I have a GP where testing is a little bit better, but still there's shame around the kind of sex I'm having, the way I have sex. I'm told all the time by the doctor that, well, maybe you shouldn't have this kind of sex because then we'd have to test for this, and that's too hard for us to do that. And it's like, well, but you're the doctor. Figure it out. Test. So there's a real lack of understanding around ableism in the healthcare system, especially when it comes to the fact that disabled people are allowed to take risks. They're allowed to do things that are not the safe way. I've done those things, but that's why I'm in your office to get tested. So if a disabled person comes in whatever way they come in and they say, I need your help to make this testing more accessible, figure it out. I'm going to skip the other stories because I want to save like 1 minute for questions. Those are more important than me talking about my threesome, which I can tell you all about later. It's fine. Okay. And lastly, what can we do to combat sexual ableism and provide access? We need to start talking to queer men about sexuality and disability in queer settings. So places like the Pump Jack, places like all the bars around here that I know you all go to and are going to tonight for Halloween things. We need to have discussions about sex and disability in those spaces. I see a ton of fundraisers for HIV and AIDS. I'd love to see similar things for queer disabled men to get access. Do a bike ride so I can get a ramp into your bar. Do a bike ride so that I can get into your space without having to fight for it all the time. Do something to show that you care that I exist. And so I'd like to see more things like that. And hey, again, the Pump Jack, call me. I will do some work for you. We need to rent lifts and Hoyers and attending care workers and whatever else is needed to make these spaces as accessible as possible. It's not just having a ramp or an elevator or any of those things. It's about asking the disabled person, what do you need? What is the cost of that? And how do we do this? Especially gay, white, cis men have money, a lot of money. So we need to start putting that money into access. So and we need to admit that the LGBTQ community and the 2S community as well doesn't know a lot about the disabled community. We don't know a lot about each other. We need to work together. All of us are marginalized. We need to remember to see that as a strength and work together. We need to be real about that and be honest. But so many people will say things like, oh yeah, I read up about your disability on Google. Oh great, that doesn't tell you anything about me. We need to talk way more about what we don't know and be okay with that. Pretending like you know doesn't mean you know. If you just own the fact you don't know a lot about disability, we'll get much further because we'll be able to teach each other. Okay. Do I have time for questions? I'm over time now, aren't I? All right. Okay, 1 or 2. Thanks, everybody.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions if people have a particularly burning question. There are microphones around the room. There's one over there and another one there. And that one says 3, so there's probably a 2 somewhere also. But looks like we have a question over here.
Despite having spent my first 2 weeks of architecture school 4 decades ago in a wheelchair because the campus was adjacent to the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, and I had done work on an ongoing basis around home modifications, it came as a real surprise to me as a 15-year immigrant to Canada that BC doesn't actually have an accessibility code. They've just started conversations on it last month. I was asked to help facilitate. As far as I know, we have 4 provinces that have accessibility codes, Ontario being the first, and I understand it's not a particularly effective one. It seems to me that it's a real case of neglect of people who have less than constant access to the attention of our politicians that we would create a situation here in British Columbia where we're looking at this now. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's shameful in my mind.
Thank you for your question. I would agree with you that it is a problem. I am not super well versed on BC's history with accessibility or in access. I can say that Ontario's code right now, as it stands, is really, really bad, really, really poor. We are supposed to have all of Ontario accessible by 2025. That's in 5 years. Every disabled person in Ontario laughs at that and goes, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. I think we need to fix these problems of access. We need to start talking more to disabled people and asking them what they need and bringing them in for not just 1 or 2 days of consultation, long-term, months and years of like, okay, how would you fix this? If money was no object and we could fix this for you, what do you need? And really pick their brains for, and pay them for their time, obviously, but ask them, well, how do we fix this? And get the lived experience into those codes so that things will change. Right now, when the codes are written, they're generally written by non-disabled people who are trying their best but have no lived experience to back it up. So, again, I can only speak to Ontario's accessibility code, which needs a lot of work, but I would hope that when BC starts to look at that, they would really mind their disabled community to get the lived experience to make that code work.
That's all we have for time, I think, for questions.
Okay.
But I think Andrew will probably be sticking around. We're going to break into the concurrent sessions right now, so maybe another round of applause before we split the room again. Thank you, everyone, and take a look at your programs about where you're supposed to go next, and we're going to be splitting the room again, so you might want to clear a path.
Yay. I'm going to say this up.